In a turn of events that is, not mind-boggling to me, anybody with eyes could have seen this coming, man. It looked like the Browns is cleaning house. And it looked like Andrew Berry probably finna keep his damn job. Because Jimmy Haslam see the buffoonery that is going on in his city and within his organization. That is these offensive linemen not blocking for Shedeur. I mean, it is getting so bad. I mean, I've done so many videos now at this point exposing these offensive linemen. It should be criminal, bro. Straight criminal what they doing to Shedeur at this point.
Really, really good. Proud of you.
Cool.
Really, really nice job.
You're not fully proud, kinda.
I'm
kinda proud.
Look, for your flip side, it was a perfect no, but you made plays, you operated, so it's just stacked.
I love when you tell the facts, dude. No, but it's okay. It's okay.
Listen, you did a nice job, okay? So just take what you learned from tonight, apply it to the joint practices, and then the next preseason game. All right?
You were the real player now. I'm gonna bring that sauce to you.
I know you will. I know you will. Really good job. That's a great start.
Breaking. And no, this is not one of those fake outrage headlines that disappears in 24 hours. This is the kind of story that makes front offices sweat, fan bases argue, and careers quietly hang in the balance. Because what just happened in Cleveland? Yeah, the internet couldn't believe it, and you won't either. If you thought you'd seen it all in the NFL, think again. This is Spill News, where secrets don't leak, they explode. 1 minute. Shedeur Sanders is fighting for his life behind an offensive line that looks like it was assembled off Craigslist. The next minute, Browns GM Andrew Berry is cutting linemen like receipts after a bad breakup. Coincidence? Or panic mode activated? And let's be real for a second. When a quarterback faces brutal pressure at a historic level and the organization's response is clean house, you already know something ugly happened behind closed doors.
But noticing, y'all, this is what Mel Kiper said yesterday. This right here is crazy. So Mel Kiper said this. Mel Kiper stated,
text messages, closed door meetings, quiet blame games, the kind nobody wants to take responsibility for. So let me ask you this. Focus on it. If you were in Shedeur's position, same betrayal, same pressure, same silence from the people paid to protect you, what would you do? Because fans are furious. Analysts are whispering, and insiders are saying, bro said too much and they had to move fast. We're about to break it all down, and trust me, it gets uglier. Tonight in Cleveland, the lights looked bright, the cameras rolled, and the smiles were practiced, but underneath it all sat a story nobody wanted to say out loud. This wasn't just about football. This was about trust, pressure, and a rookie quarterback learning the hard way that the NFL doesn't always protect its own. Shedeur Sanders walked into this season carrying a last name, a spotlight, and expectations heavy enough to crack concrete. Every snap felt like a test, every dropback a gamble, and every hit a reminder that talent alone doesn't keep you upright on Sundays. Before the cuts, before the headlines, before the panic moves, there were signs. Quiet ones, missed assignments, late protections, linemen turning their heads a second too slow, while defenders came screaming through the gaps. Fans noticed, analysts hinted, but the organization, they smiled through press conferences and promised patience. Patience is easy when you're not the one getting hit. Patience is easy when the bruises don't show up on your own body. Shedeur didn't complain. That's the part people forget. Week after week, he stood at the podium and took the blame like a veteran. He talked about learning curves, about speeding up his reads, about adjusting to the pro game. He said all the right things. Meanwhile, the tape told a different story. Pocket collapsing, routes cut short, plays dying before they could even breathe. This wasn't a young quarterback holding the ball too long. This was a young quarterback running for his life. Inside the building, whispers started early. Coaches muttering about communication. Assistants pointing at protection schemes. Linemen frustrated. Pointing fingers at the quarterback for changing plays, for calling audibles, for daring to take control of the offense. It's always easier to blame the kid than admit the foundation is cracked, especially when that kid brings cameras, headlines, and expectations the locker room didn't ask for. The pressure mounted fast, not just on the field, but behind closed doors. Cleveland is a city that has seen this movie before. Promising quarterback arrives. Hope spikes. Jersey sales soar. The nits pile up. The confidence erodes. And suddenly everyone is asking who failed who first. Veterans in the room felt it. Young players felt it. Even the front office felt it, whether they admitted it or not. Games came and went, and the numbers got uglier. Pressure rates climbed. Sacks stacked. Hurry after hurry turned into a highlight reel nobody wanted replayed. Social media clips went viral, slowed down, zoomed in, dissected frame by frame. People weren't just criticizing play calls anymore. They were questioning effort. They were questioning accountability. And once those questions start, they don't stop. Then came the Chicago game, the one insiders still talk about in lowered voices. From the opening drive, it was chaos. Protection calls missed. Assignments blown. Defenders in the backfield before routes even developed. Shedeur took hit after hit, popped up, reset, and did it again. Toughness turned into survival. Survival turned into spectacle. And somewhere between the second quarter and halftime, something shifted upstairs. Front offices don't like being embarrassed. They hate it, especially when embarrassment is public, viral, and attached to a player the league is watching closely. Phones started buzzing. Executives started pacing. The same people preaching patience suddenly wanted solutions, fast ones. And in the NFL, fast solutions usually mean someone pays the price. By Monday morning, the narrative changed. Quietly at first, reporters started hearing words like evaluation and accountability. Roster spots became conversations. Practice reps became auditions. Linemen who were once told to settle and suddenly felt the ground move under their feet. You could feel it in the building. Tension thick enough to cut. Shedeur, for his part, stayed silent. No tweets. No subtweets. No cryptic emojis. Just film study and rehab, ice packs and long nights. He knew what the numbers said. He knew what the league was whispering. He also knew none of it mattered if he couldn't get time to breathe. A quarterback can only prove so much while dodging free rushers. And that's when the blame game went public. Fans turned on the line. Talk radio lit up. Analysts argued about scheme versus personnel. Some defended the front office. Others called it negligence. But everyone agreed on one thing. What was happening couldn't continue. Not if Cleveland wanted to protect its investment. Not if they wanted to avoid another chapter in a very familiar tragedy. Behind the scenes, meetings stretched longer. Voices got louder. Decisions that were supposed to wait until the offseason suddenly felt urgent. Because once the league decides you're careless with a quarterback, that label sticks. Free agents notice. Agents notice. Players notice. And reputations are harder to fix than depth charts. So when the first cut happened, it didn't shock the people inside. It shocked the people watching from the outside. One name gone, then another. The message was clear, even if nobody said out loud. This was a reset, a public one, a statement to the locker room and the league that Cleveland had seen enough. But what came next wasn't relief. It was unease, because cutting linemen doesn't erase the hits already taken. It doesn't rewind the tape. It doesn't undo the pressure that had already etched itself into muscle memory. And as the roster shuffled and the headline screamed, one question hung in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. If this is how it started, what does it say about what's coming next? The locker room felt different after that. Conversations stopped when certain people walked in. Helmets stayed on longer. Eye contact disappeared. Veterans who had survived multiple regimes recognized the signs immediately. This was organizational anxiety, the kind that seeps into practice reps and turns every mistake into a referendum. Young linemen pressed. Coaches shortened leashes. And every snap Shedeur took felt like it carried two weights, the defense in front of him and the expectations behind him. Outside the facility, narratives hardened. Some said the quarterback needed to get rid of the ball faster. Others said no young passer could succeed under those conditions. Highlight shows argued both sides, cutting clips to fit whatever point they wanted to make. But numbers don't lie, and the numbers were brutal. Pressure on nearly half of his dropbacks. Reads disrupted. Timing destroyed. Development stalled by chaos. What made it worse was the silence from the top. No clear admission, no firm promise, just corporate language and vague reassurances about improvement. To players, that sounds like uncertainty. To fans, it sounds like denial. And to a rookie quarterback, it sounds like being left alone in the storm. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit yet. Once confidence starts cracking, it spreads. It spreads from linemen to receivers, from coaches to players, from the field to the front office. And Cleveland was standing right at that edge, staring down a familiar path, hoping this time would be different. Decisions were being made in rooms without windows, fueled by fear, optics, and urgency, not patience, not development, not trust, just survival instincts kicking in everywhere at once. But what came next, even as enemies didn't expect? The cuts weren't the scandal. They were the signal. Because once the roster started changing, the leaks started flowing. And that's when the story stopped being about protection schemes and turned into something far uglier. This is the part where insiders suddenly remember things. This is the part where anonymous sources start talking to blogs they'd never returned a call from before. And Cleveland became loud in all the wrong ways. By midweek, the narrative had split in two. Publicly, the Browns framed the moves as routine evaluation. Just football, just business. Privately, people were pointing fingers so hard it felt like a courtroom without a judge. One staffer allegedly told a local reporter off the record, "This should have been handled months ago, but nobody wanted to be the bad guy." Another insider was more blunt. They knew the line was a problem. They just didn't think it would look this bad this fast. And then the stat leaked. The one that lit everything on fire. Nearly half of Shedeur Sanders' dropbacks under pressure. Analysts started throwing around phrases like historic, unprecedented, borderline malpractice. Some tried to downplay it, saying small sample size, early season noise. But when ESPN tracking data started circulating, the tone shifted. This wasn't normal rookie struggle. This was exposure. Social media did what it always does. Clips slowed down. Freeze frames zoomed in on missed blocks. Tweets piled up. Why is the right tackle just watching? How is this guy untouched? You can't develop a QB like this. Even former players chimed in, shaking their heads, saying things on podcasts they'd never say on a team payroll. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's when the rumor mill really spun up. One blog claimed there were heated exchanges in the offensive meeting room. Another set of veteran linemen questioned the play calling in front of younger players. A third hinted at text messages floating around, screenshots never published but constantly referenced. "He thinks he's bigger than the system," one alleged quote read. About who? Depends on who you ask. The quarterback, the coordinator, the GM. Everyone blamed someone else. And right in the middle of it all was Shedeur, still saying nothing. No clapbacks, no Instagram stories. Just practice footage of him taking snaps behind yet another shuffled line, learning new cadences, new protections, new chemistry on the fly. That silence, some saw it as maturity. Others saw it as isolation. Then came the reactions from the outside circle. Former teammates, family friends, media personalities with sources close to the situation. One viral clip showed a commentator saying, "This reminds me of how organizations quietly ruin quarterbacks, then act surprised when it doesn't work." Another joked darkly, "Nothing screams loyalty like cutting linemen after the damage is already done." Sarcasm became the language of the week. But the most explosive whispers weren't about the line. They were about the front office. Specifically, about whether Andrew Berry had underestimated how quickly this would unravel. There were claims he believed scheme could cover flaws, that mobility would mask breakdowns, that youth would absorb punishment better. Football logic mixed with optimism and crossed into denial. Fans didn't care about the nuance. They wanted accountability. Jerseys and stands turned into signs. Talk radio hosts started asking questions that hadn't been asked out loud yet. Is this negligence? Is this mismanagement? How long before this kid gets hurt for real? And every question made the organization retreat further into safe language. Then the leaks escalated. One anonymous report claimed the coaching staff had flagged protection concerns early, but was told to work with what you have. Another suggested free agent linemen were passed over to preserve cap flexibility. Allegedly, always allegedly. But when enough allegedly stack up, they start to feel like a pattern. Meanwhile, blogs started connecting dots that may or may not belong together. Old draft decisions resurfaced. Missed picks, linemen who never developed, veterans who walked, contracts that didn't pan out. The narrative shifted from one bad stretch to a systemic issue, a philosophy problem. And once that label sticks, it's hard to scrub off. The most damaging moment came when a supposed leaked message made the rounds. No source, no verification, just a screenshot-shaped rumor claiming someone inside the building said, "He'll have to learn the hard way." Whether it was real didn't matter. It fit too perfectly. And in the court of public opinion, fitting matters more than facts. Shedeur supporters went on the offensive, threads defending his decision-making, clips showing him delivering strikes under pressure, comparisons to other young quarterbacks who were protected and flourished. The argument was simple. Talent isn't the issue. Environment is. And history is full of careers that never recovered from early chaos. At the same time, critics piled on. They pointed to college tape, to tendencies, to holding the ball. They said great quarterbacks elevate everyone around them. They asked why other rookies survived similar situations. It became a war of narratives, each side armed with clips, stats, and selective memory. Through it all, the Browns stayed quiet. Too quiet. No fiery defense. No emotional backing. Just statements. And silence in moments like this is never neutral. It gets interpreted as guilt, as fear, as calculation. By the end of the week, another cut came. Then another move. Practice squad promotions. Tryouts. The front office looked busy, but busy doesn't always mean effective. Sometimes it just means scrambling. And scrambling is what happens when a story gets away from you. The league was watching now. Other teams took notes. Agents whispered to clients, "Be careful there. Look how fast they turn on people." Reputations travel faster than press releases. And just when it seemed like the storm had peaked, just when fans thought the worst had already surfaced, another name entered the conversation. A name tied to past decisions, past warnings, and past ignored red flags. Someone whose fingerprints were all over how this roster was built. But just when we thought it was over, another name came up. That name didn't need to be said out loud. Everyone in Cleveland already knew it. Because once the focus shifted away from players being cut and toward the people who built the situation in the first place, the story took on a different weight. This wasn't just about linemen anymore. This was about responsibility, about timelines, about whether this franchise had actually learned anything from its past, or if it was once again repeating the same mistakes with a different face under center. The aftermath hit fast. Fans didn't wait for official explanations. They started drawing their own conclusions. Comment sections turned into tribunals. Some demanded firings. Others demanded patience. And a loud group demanded protection for the one person who had the least control over any of it. Shedeur Sanders became the center of a strange contradiction. Loved by the spotlight, isolated by the system, marketed as the future while being treated like a test subject. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll started showing. Sources close to the locker room describe a quarterback who was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Every hit leaves a mark, even when you get back up. Every missed block plants a seed of doubt, and doubt is dangerous. It changes footwork. It rushes reads. It turns instincts into hesitation. The same traits critics later use as proof something was wrong all along. Some veterans tried to rally. Quiet words in the huddle, extra film sessions. But chemistry can't be forced, especially when lineups change weekly and trust is fragile. Coaches adjusted schemes, roll pockets, shorten drops, try to manufacture safety. But there's only so much you can scheme around when protection breaks down at the snap. Outside the building, the narrative hardened. National shows started framing Cleveland as a cautionary tale. This is how you ruin a young quarterback, one analyst said. Another called it organizational whiplash. The story was no longer local. It was league-wide. And once that happens, pressure shifts upward. That's when talk of consequences started creeping in. Not official investigations, not lawsuits, but reputational damage. The kind that doesn't come with paperwork, but costs you free agents, trust, and time. People whispered about ownership frustration, about closed-door meetings where voices were raised and questions asked that didn't have easy answers. Could this have been prevented? Should it have been handled earlier? Why did it take public embarrassment to trigger action? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, was this panic or was this admission? For Shedeur, the season became something else entirely. Less about wins and losses, more about survival and proof. Proof that he could take hits and keep delivering. Proof that the noise hadn't broken him. Proof that when given even a sliver of time, the talent everyone talked about was real. And in flashes, it was tight window throws, calm under fire, moments that reminded people why the hype existed in the first place. But flashes don't build legacies. Foundations do. And foundations require patience, planning, and protection. Things Cleveland promised but struggled to provide. As the weeks passed, the tone softened slightly. Less outrage, more fatigue. Fans asking not who to blame, but what comes next. Speculation turned to the future. Draft talk, free agency, cap space, names floated, scenarios imagined. Some said the organization would overcorrect, throwing resources at the line. Others feared cosmetic fixes. Short-term patches meant to quiet criticism rather than solve problems. History offered examples of both outcomes, and Cleveland fans knew them well. Through all of it, Shedeur remained a constant, still taking snaps, still answering questions, still refusing to publicly point fingers. That restraint earned respect in some circles. In others, it fueled frustration. People wanted him to speak out, to demand better, to force accountability. But young quarterbacks rarely win those battles, especially early. There were moments when it looked like redemption might be possible. A cleaner pocket here, a well-protected drive there. Small victories fans clung to as signs of progress, but progress felt fragile. One misassignment away from chaos. One injury away from reshuffling everything again. And then, just as quickly as the story had exploded, the attention began to drift. Another controversy, another headline, another team in crisis. That's how it works. But inside Cleveland, nothing was resolved. The questions remained, the scars remained, and the choices made in those frantic weeks would echo far beyond one season. This is the part people forget when the headlines fade. Development isn't linear. Damage isn't always visible. And sometimes the most lasting impact of chaos shows up years later, when potential never quite becomes promise. When a quarterback who once looked fearless starts playing cautious. When instincts dull. When confidence erodes quietly. Whether Cleveland can reverse that trajectory is still unknown. Maybe the cuts were the first step toward accountability. Maybe they were a panic response that came too late. Maybe this becomes a turning point. Or maybe it becomes another chapter in a long story fans wish they could forget. What's certain is this: Shedeur Sanders didn't vanish. He didn't collapse. He didn't retreat. He stood in the storm and kept throwing. And that alone changes how the story should be told. Not as a bust narrative, not as a failure, but as a test. One that revealed more about the system around him than the player himself. And as the dust settles, one image lingers. A young quarterback walking off the field, helmet in hand, bruised but upright, while the organization scrambled behind him, trying to catch up to a problem it helped create. He didn't disappear. He didn't break. But the secret stayed. So now the question isn't whether this was bad football. The question is, how bad does it have to get before real accountability shows up? Because what we just watched wasn't just a rookie learning curve. It wasn't just NFL growing pains. It was a front office gambling with a young quarterback's future and hoping nobody would notice until it was too late. And when the pressure became impossible to hide, when the clips went viral, when the numbers told the truth louder than any press conference ever could, then the cuts came. But was that leadership or damage control? That's what I want to know from you. Do you believe Andrew Berry made the right call cutting those linemen? Or do you think this was a panic move meant to shift blame and quiet the noise? More importantly, how long should a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders be expected to survive chaos before people stop judging him and start judging the system around him? Because history is full of talented players who never recover from being thrown into the fire too early, with no protection and no patience. And let's be real, if this was your franchise quarterback, if this was your team, would you trust the same people who let this happen to suddenly fix it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want every take, the supporters, the critics, the skeptics, all of it. This conversation matters because this story is still being written. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because this situation in Cleveland, it's far from over. More moves are coming. More leaks are coming. And when they do, we'll be right here breaking it down. No filters, no spin. Stay locked in. Stay sharp. Because the truth always comes out eventually.